Welcome once again to Torah is for Everyone. I welcome you, Jerry and Baruch and Richard in California. As I said to you before we began, Miriam is not feeling too well, so we need to pray for a refuah shalema for her. And so who knows the Torah portion this week? Baruch, you know what it is? Remember?
Shoftim.
Shoftim. Good. A shofet is a judge. So we're going to look at one of the verses that our rabbi always used to say that his father emphasized in his life. Tzedek, tzedek tirdof. Justice, justice we must pursue. If there's anything that we have at the heart of our people, our Jewish people, is the idea of justice, and we will do everything for justice. And so we're going to see 4 different types of characteristics or characters in this portion. He's going to be choosing. Moses is telling us that we need to choose leaders. We have the first leader is the judge, the shofet, and then we have the king, the melech. We have the kohen, the priest, and we have the prophet, the nevi'im, the prophets. And each of those are leaders, all who have a different role, a different purpose. And all of us are called to be like them. They are to lead us in the proper way. So without further ado, let me share the screen and we will read this together. So here we see the Shoftim. And God is telling Moses, you shall appoint magistrates and officials, shoftim v'shotrim, for all your tribes. The officials could be the policemen, those who carry out the law for all our tribes. In all the settlements that your God, Yud He Vav He, is giving you. Brian, I'm going to put you on mute, okay? Because you're making a bit of a noise and I'd like to be able to read it in quiet. Thank you. So here, let me just close this. Here we go. And here's, so these shoftim v'shotrim in all our settlements, wherever we live, that your God is giving you, remember, he gives us the land, they shall govern the people with due justice, tzedek. That's very important that we have justice in our lives. You shall not judge unfairly. When we look at the world today, we cannot find fair judges. And it says here, show no partiality. You shall not take bribes, for the bribes blind the eyes of the discerning and upset the plea of the just. You know, when we think of the statue that they have, I think it's the Statue of Liberty at New York, where you have the judge, the woman who represents justice, and she has a blinders over her eyes, and she's carrying the scales of justice, because we mustn't be partial to those who maybe are just too poor. So we feel sorry for them. We don't judge them properly because, oh, you know, it's not their fault. They're poor. Or those who are very wealthy who could buy the judges. They're saying, for bribes blind the eyes of the discerning and upset the plea of the just. Tzedek, tzedek tirdof. Justice, justice shall you pursue. Why? So that you may thrive and occupy the land that your God is giving you. God wants the land of Israel to be ruled by just leaders, righteous men. And immediately after this, it goes from justice to you shall not set up a sacred post, any kind of pole beside the altar of your God that you may make, or erect a stone pillar, for such your God, Yud He Vav He, detests. All the pagan religions did not practice justice. There was no compassion to be found, and there was no justice. So we'll see one always following the other, where you have wherever there are false gods, you will not find justice. You shall not bring an offering to your God, an ox or a sheep that has any defect of a serious kind. That is abhorrent to your God. And one of the reasons is when we were to bring an offering to our God, it means that we were about to present ourselves to Him in order to either thank Him, to ask Him for forgiveness for something, and we were to bring the best that we had. If you go and visit somebody, let's say you're going for dinner, you don't bring the leftovers, you bring the best to the people who are inviting you. How much more do you bring the very best that you have to your God before you're going to present yourself to Him? If there is found among you, in any one of the places that you live, that your God is giving you, a man or woman who has affronted your God and transgressed the covenant, which is that at that time we only had the 10 Commandments. We didn't have the full Torah. We didn't have any of the prophets or the writings. No New Testament, no Quran, nothing. We had the 10 Commandments. That's it. So if anyone is found among you who has affronted your God and transgressed these 10 Commandments, again, turning to the worship of other gods. Remember, we had left Egypt. God is taking away from those gods where we would bow down to them. Here, to the sun or the moon or any of the heavenly host, something I never commanded. This is where astrology comes in. These were all the New Age practices come in, to have nothing to do with them. And you have been informed or have learned of it, then you shall make a thorough inquiry. If it's true, and the facts are established, that horrible, abominable thing that was perpetrated in Israel, you shall take the man or woman who did that wicked thing out to the public place, and you shall stone that man or woman to death. If I had lived at that time, I would have been stoned to death. I'm grateful that God is merciful and I was born now, because I was involved in all those things that God told us not to do. A person shall be put to death only on the testimony of 2 or more witnesses. No one shall be put to death on the testimony of a single witness. Now, the witnesses had a very important role to play, and they all had to be in agreement. And it was only 2 or more. You can never have only one person who can give testimony against someone. And those people who gave testimony, let the hands of the witnesses be the first to put the condemned to death. So imagine if you were going to condemn someone, let's say today you have a jury, they're all sitting there and they're all judging this person. If they had to be the first one to kill them, to stone them to death, let me tell you, many of them might have changed their tune. And then it would be followed by the hands of the rest of the people. Thus shall you sweep evil out from amongst your midst. God did not want our people to live a life of evil. He wanted us to be just and righteous, to be a light to the nations. Now, if a case is too difficult for you to decide, whether it's a controversy of homicide, civil law, or assault, matters of dispute in your courts, you shall promptly go to the place that your God, Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh, will have chosen, and appear before the priests or the magistrate in charge of the time and present your problem. So you see here, the priests were not left out. Today, we have taken the Bible out of our courts. People no longer swear on the Bible. But at that time, God was always to be present. The Levitical priest who represented us before the creator of the world and the human magistrates, they both were part of presenting judging the problem. When they have announced to you the verdict in the case, you shall carry out the verdict that is announced to you from that place that the Lord chose, observing scrupulously all their instruction to you. In other words, if they've decided it, you must do it. You shall act in accordance with the instruction given you and the ruling handed down to you. You must not deviate from the verdict that they announced to you, either to the right or to the left. It's taken a lot of time for these people to consider, and they would be responsible before God. Should either party act presumptuously and disregard the Kohen, the priest charged with serving there, your God, or the magistrate, that party shall die. Thus shall you sweep all evil out from Israel. Remember, this was at the very beginning of the creation, of the formation of our people, so that it seems very strong what God is asking us to do. But if we establish these things right from the beginning, we would stick to them throughout our history. And all the people would hear and be afraid and would not act presumptuously with pride again. If after you've entered the land that your God, Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh, has assigned to you over and over, we are reading that God gave us the land. So no matter what anybody says in the Middle East about that land, that it doesn't belong to us, let them go and fight with our God because he gave it to us. And when we take possession of it and settle in it, you decide. Now this says, if you decide, I will set up a king over me, as do all the nations about me. You see, we always wanted to be like the other nations. God never asked us to elect a king. He was going to be our king. We would be able to directly speak to him, but it was not to be, because we always choose something that we could touch with our hand, that we could see, something material. And here it says, if you decide to choose a king, you shall be free. You can do it. You can set a king over yourself, but one chosen by your God. Now, I don't know if you remember the first king of Israel. Does anybody remember the first king, what his name was? Well, his name was King Saul. God did not choose King Saul. The people did, by his stature. He was tall, he was good looking, a good politician. They chose him. When Saul failed him, David was the one that was chosen. But at that time, it was, I think Nathan was the prophet at the time. And when he went to the house of Yishai, of Jesse, to look for a king, that's where he was told to go, he saw all the brothers of David. David was the youngest. He was living out in the fields. He was a shepherd. He was the last one that we would have chosen. All the others were handsome, were tall. David was ruddy and all schmutzig from being out with the sheep, but God knew his heart. And God says here, be sure to set as a king over yourself one of your own people. You must not set a foreigner over you, one who is not your kin. Moreover, he shall not keep many horses, or send people back to Egypt to add to his horses, since the Lord has warned you. In other words, in today's terms, don't let him have too many Porsches or Mercedes in the garage. Don't go all over the world looking to buy more cars. Do not go back to Egypt again. Don't go looking for gold and for idols. And he shall not have many wives, lest his heart go astray, nor shall he amass silver and gold to excess. And we see this was exactly what King Solomon did. King Solomon had 1,000 wives, And one of the reasons that he was led astray was that some of the wives that he chose were from pagan nations, and his heart went astray. And he did amass a lot of silver and gold. For when he is seated, and this is what the king was supposed to do, when he is seated on his royal throne, he shall have a copy of this Torah written for him on a scroll by the Levitical priests. Let it remain with him, and let him read it all his life, so that he may learn to revere, to honor his God, Yud-He-Vav-He, no other, to observe faithfully every word of this Torah, as well as the chukim, as well as the other rules and regulations, the et ha-chukim ha'ele, le-asot asetim, asetem, so that he would do them faithfully, do the Torah, ha-Torah hazeh, hazot, ve'et ha-chukim. This way he won't act proud. He won't be above his fellows or deviate from the Torah either to the right or to the left, to the end that he and his descendants may reign long in the midst of Israel. This one verse is so important. If the kings, if the leaders today in Israel were all to have a Torah and read the Torah every single day, knowing what God wanted. I'm not talking about all the rules and extra rules and regulations, all the things that we have added to the Torah. That's not what God is asking us. We may want that, but God is asking us not to deviate from his Torah. Remember, all we had at this point were the commandments. We had maybe some of the writings that Moses had from the book of Genesis, Bereshit, to Numbers. The Devarim wasn't finished yet. So we had what he heard from God, and the instructions neither to the right or to the left, yashar, straight, so that he, the king, and his descendants may reign long in the midst of Israel. And if we read the rest of the Bible, we will see how all the kings, sometimes the king was right, was good and just, and followed it, tore down the high places, and sometimes the kings were brought in false gods into Israel. And that's been our problem throughout our history. The Levitical priests, the entire tribe of Levi shall have no territorial portion with Israel. In other words, all the tribes were allotted land, the Levites weren't, because they were to live off only from the Lord's offerings by fire as their portion. The people would bring offerings and they would support the Levitical priests, but they had no land among their brothers as their portion. This then shall be the Kohen's due from the people. Everyone who brings an offering, whether an ox or a sheep, must give the shoulder, the cheeks, and the stomach to the priest. You shall also give him the first fruits, the best of your grain, your wine, your oil, the first fruits of your sheep. For your God has chosen him and his descendants out of all your tribes to be in attendance for the service in the name of Yud-He-Vav-He for all times. The Levitical priests, the Kohanim, were not put up on pedestals. They were to serve in the name of God for all time. They were the servants of the people. They were not above the people. They were to serve the people. This is really important because we have lost that. Today we put them so high, higher than anybody, and God is not saying that in the Torah. If a Levite would go from any of the settlements throughout Israel where he had been residing to the place that the Lord has chosen, he may do so whenever he pleases. He may serve in the name of his God, Yud He Vav He, no other God, only him, like all his fellow Levites who are in attendance there before the Lord. They shall receive equal shares of the dues without regard to personal gifts. When you enter the land that your God is giving you, again, always reminding us, our God is giving us. He repeats it over and over and over. He's giving it to us, but we would have to work hard to get it. You shall not learn to imitate the abhorrent practices of those nations. Now, when I first came after my New Age days, after I had lost everything, I was in debt, I was sick, I came back home, literally with the tail between my legs. I had searched everywhere. I had nothing. I was in my early 40s. I was a mess. And a cousin of mine opened the Torah to this very verse. I will never forget it. God told Moses, when you enter the land that your God, Yud He Vav He, is giving you, you shall not learn to imitate the abominable practices of those nations. Let no one be found among you who gives their daughter or son to the fire, who is an augur, someone who is like a soothsayer, a dreamer of dreams, a diviner, a sorcerer, who's involved in all these ancient practices, the rune stones, the astronomy, the hidden things, and feels so spiritual above everybody else. One who casts spells, sits in seances, who consults ghosts, who channels, looks for familiar spirits, who calls back people from the dead. For anyone who does these things is an abomination, is abhorrent to Yud He Vav He, and is because of these abhorrent things that your God, Yud He Vav He, is dispossessing them before you. You must be wholehearted with your God. Give him everything. Don't turn looking in any other place. No superstitions, no readings, no. And I had done all those things, which completely, if not almost completely, destroyed my life. And I said, the first thing I said to my cousin when she read these things, oh my goodness, I've done all of them. How come nobody ever told me this? And that's why now I'm busy.
What are you reading?
I'm reading in Deuteronomy 18, verse
18.
verse 14 right now. Those nations that you are about to dispossess do indeed resort to soothsayers and augurs. To you, however, your God, Yud He Vav He, has not assigned the like. From among your people, from among your own people, your God, again, Yud He Vav He, no other, will raise up for you a prophet like myself. That is whom you shall heed. Now, one of the things that when I was involved in Christianity, one of the things that they do is take verses, any verse they want in the Torah, and put Jesus in there. And they would say, this is the prophet. But to tell you the truth, this verse, God will raise up many prophets. The next prophet, Moses was a prophet, but it says here, God will raise up for you, meaning Moses, a prophet. No, sorry, Moses is saying, God will raise up for you, the people of Israel, a prophet like me, Moses. That is whom you shall heed. The next prophet would be Joshua. And after that, we've had many prophets. We've had Elijah, Jeremiah, Isaiah, Ezekiel, so many prophets. Those we shall heed. And how do we know? what the voice of a true prophet was? God's going to tell us. This is just what you asked of your God, Yud He Vav He, at Horeb, which is Mount Sinai. On the day when we all assembled there at the base of Mount Sinai, when we said, "Let me not hear the voice of my God," the people standing there didn't want to hear his voice any longer or see this wondrous fire anymore because they were afraid they were going to die. Whereupon Yud He Vav He said to me, Moses, "They have done well in speaking this way. I will raise up for them from among their own people a prophet like you, in whose mouth I will put my words, and who will speak to them all that I command. Anyone who fails to heed the words of the prophet speaking in my name, I myself will call him to account." That's why it's so important to read the words of our prophets. How would we know what's right and wrong? Like one of the people that I worked with during my New Age days, I was a business manager for a man, a Jewish man, who said he channeled a prophet Isaiah. Now, if I had read the prophet Isaiah, I would have known that his words were not from the prophet Isaiah, because it says here, any prophet who presumes to speak in my name an oracle that I did not command to be uttered, or speaks in the name of other gods, that prophet shall die. And should you ask yourselves, how can we know that the oracle was not spoken by Yud He Vav He? How would I have known that the things that he said was not spoken by God? If the prophet speaks in the name of God, Yud He Vav He, and the oracle does not come true, that oracle was not spoken by Yud He Vav He. The prophet has uttered it presumptuously, in pride, on his own. Do not fear that person. In other words, don't honor him, don't listen to him, don't be led by him, because he will lead you in the wrong direction. And let me tell you, I can give you all my experiences. I was led in the wrong direction. When your God, Yud He Vav He, has cut down the nations whose land your God, again, Yud He Vav He is assigning to you, he's giving it to us, and you have dispossessed them. We've gone in and we've kicked them out, and we've settled in their towns. You shall set aside 3 cities in the land that your God is giving you to possess. These cities are the cities of refuge. Survey the distances and divide into 3 parts the territory of the country that your God has allotted to you, so that any man who has killed someone may have a place to flee to. In other words, this is somebody who didn't kill on purpose, because someone who killed someone else on purpose, according to Leviticus, that person needed to die. The Torah speaks the death penalty when you have 3 witnesses, 3 just witnesses. That person would die, and they would be the first ones to stone them to death. But here, if someone kills them by accident, then they can go to one of these 3 parts, and it's going to give you a little more detail. Now, this is the case of the person who killed, who may flee there and live. One who has slain another unwittingly, without having been an enemy in the past. In other words, he didn't plan it. It wasn't premeditated. It was by accident. For instance, a man goes with another fellow into a grove to cut wood. As his hand swings the axe to cut down the tree, an axe flies off the handle and strikes the other so that he dies. Obviously, it was an accident. That man shall flee to one of the cities, and he can live. So, but the reason that they divided the territories so that it wouldn't be too far for this man to flee, because otherwise, If the distance is great, the family of the person who he killed, the blood avenger, would pursue the man who killed in anger, overtake him, and may strike him down. Yet he did not incur the death penalty since he had never been the other's enemy. You see how justice reigns here in the Torah? That's why I command you, set aside 3 cities. When your God enlarges your territory, because as we were going to go in, we would take more and more territory, as was sworn to your fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and gives you all the land that was promised to be given to your fathers. We don't have all that land yet, but we will. If you faithfully observe all this, here it says, Kol ha-mitzvotah, mitzvah, hazot, all these commandments, and do them that I command you this day. And to sum up the commandments, you're to love your God, to walk in God's ways at all times. That's what these commandments were given us. Then you shall add 3 more towns to those 3. So obviously there were going to be a lot of people, and there were going to be more towns where accidents happen. Thus the blood of the innocent will not be shed, bringing blood guilt upon you in the land that your God is allotting to you. And these 6 towns that were allotted were very different than the prison system, because they would be free to live within those cities. They didn't have to worry. They weren't in a prison, but they were protected in those cities. As soon as they left, they could be killed by the family. So they needed to stay there until the next of the Levite would take over the position of the Levite who died. If, however, a man who is the enemy of another lies in wait, here's premeditation, and sets upon the victim, in other words, he attacks him, strikes a fatal blow, and then flees to one of these towns, the elders of this town shall have him brought back from there, shall hand him over to the blood avenger to be put to death. In order, he's taken to court and he's going to be put to death. Show him no pity. We're not to show pity on someone who killed on purpose, who premeditated. One of the 10 commandments, you shall not commit premeditated murder. Thus, you will purge Israel of the blood of the innocent, and it will go well with you. It will go well in Israel if we keep his commandments. Here's another commandment. Here's another of the way of living out the commandments. This one pertains to the last of the 5 commandments, to love your neighbor. You shall not move your neighbor's landmarks. If they have a piece of property and that property has been measured out, set up by previous generations, in the property that will be allotted to you in the land, don't move his landmarks. A single witness may not validate against an accused person any guilt or blame for any offense that may be committed. A case can be valid only on the testimony of 2 or more witnesses. If someone appears against another party, now this is important because this is a testament, someone who's going to give testament to somebody else. If someone appears against another party to testify maliciously and gives incriminating and false testimony, the 2 parties to the dispute shall appear before God, before the priests or the magistrates in authority at the time, and the magistrates shall make a thorough investigation. If the one who testified is a false witness, now that's number 9, You shall not bear false witness against your neighbor. Having testified falsely against a fellow Israelite, you shall do to him as the one schemed to do to the other. Thus you shall sweep evil out of your midst. Others will hear and be afraid. Such evil will not again be done in your midst. You must not show pity. Life for life, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand, foot for foot. Now, we read that in Leviticus, where it talked about that you shall not, that a person who kills, if a person kills somebody, he needs to be killed. And eye for eye, tooth for tooth had to do with just scales. Like they would pay restitution if they took out someone's eye. It didn't mean that your eye had to be taken out, but that person needed to pay for a new eye or to pay for whatever it took for that person to be healed. Tooth for tooth, hand for hand, it just means just measure. But here it's not only the person themselves, but someone who bore false witness, false testimony, because they could cause the death of another individual, and it was just as bad as the person killing them, being charged of murder on their own. If you understand what I'm saying. If you don't, then I'll try to make it clear. Okay. When you, an Israelite warrior, take the field against your enemies, and you see horses and chariots, forces larger than yours, do not fear them. For your God, Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, is with you. If every time we are afraid of something, we stop and remember that the Lord, the God who brought us out of the land of Egypt, is with us, our lives would be different. And this is some of the things that happen. We're afraid. We look around at what's going on in the world. It seems to be falling apart, and we worry, what's going to happen tomorrow? Well, am I going to lose everything? It's going to be another Holocaust. God is saying, don't worry. I am with you. Before you join battle, the priest will come forward and address the troops, not the general. The priest will come because he's the one who represents God for us. And he will say to them, Shema Israel, hear, O Israel, you are about to join battle with your enemy. You're going to battle your enemy. Do not let your courage falter. Do not be in fear or in panic or be in dread of them. And this is something that is so difficult. Our soldiers have to constantly find a way to muster their courage. But if they truly knew with all their heart that their God was with them, they would be stronger because God is real. For it is your God, Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh, who marches with you to do battle for you against your enemy, to bring you victory. If every one of our soldiers in the IDF knew this, we would be 10 times as strong. Then the officials, the Shoftim, shall address the troops as follows. Now, this is very, very, very interesting because not everybody should go to fight. This is really important. Listen to what he's saying. If there's anyone who built a new house but hasn't dedicated it, let him go back to his house, let he die in battle, and another dedicate it. In other words, he's got to be fully engaged in this war, not thinking back, who's in my house? It's a brand new house. Usually these are people who just got married and they have a new house and they have a new wife. Their minds aren't there. They need to go back home. Is there anyone who planted a vineyard but never harvested? Let him go home, lest he die in battle and another harvested. Is there anyone who just got married but has not taken her into his household? Let him go home, lest he die in battle, and another take her into his household as his wife. And look at this. The officials shall continue addressing the troops and ask them, is there anyone who is afraid or discouraged? Let him go back home, lest the courage of his comrades flag like his. One person who is negative could bring down the whole troop. And God is saying, we don't need people like these. I am with you. Send them home. Let those who are ready to fight, who are courageous, stand in battle. This is really unbelievable. You don't see that today. When the officials have finished addressing the troops, army commanders shall assume command of the troops. And when you approach a town to attack it, you shall offer it terms of peace. See, we don't go to attack just to attack. We're not looking to our forces, the IDF even today, are not called the Israeli Offense Force. It's the Israeli Defense Force. Because we don't want to attack. We defend ourselves. We want to offer it terms of peace. And if it responds peaceably and lets you in, all the people present there shall serve you as forced labor. Interesting. If it does not surrender to you, but would do battle with you, you shall lay siege to it. Remember, God is going forward for us. When your God delivers it into your hands, you shall put all its males to the sword. Imagine what the liberals and the Democrats would say about that. But God is telling us, these males will be your enemies forever. Put them to the sword. Don't be like King Saul and what he did. You may, however, take as booty the women, the children, the livestock, everything in the town, all its spoil, and enjoy the use of the spoil of your enemy, which your God is giving you. Thus shall you deal with all the towns that lie very far from you, towns that do not belong to the nations around you. In those towns, the towns of those around us, however, which your God is giving you as a heritage, you shall not let a soul remain alive. Because those people who were there, you must destroy them. These are the Hittites, the Amorites, the Canaanites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, the Jebusites, as your God commanded you, lest they lead you into doing all the abhorrent things that they have done for their gods and stand guilty before your God. Those nations that worshiped those gods showed no mercy. They had no compassion. These were gods who worshiped false gods, and they were decadent, evil, and their lifestyles were abhorrent to God. And we needed to destroy them because the land that God was giving us was to be set apart, holy for Him. When in your war against a city, you have to besiege it a long time in order to capture it. You must not destroy its trees, wielding the axe against them. You may eat from them, but you must not cut them down. Are trees of the field human to withdraw before you into the besieged town? That's one of the things, the interesting thing is that when our enemy would come in against us, one of the things that they would burn everything, which is ridiculous. The trees were to feed us. Only trees that you know do not yield food may be destroyed. These you can cut down for constructing siege works against the city that is waging war on you until it has been reduced. If in the land that your God, Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh, is assigning you to possess, again, how many times is he saying this over and over till we get it in these cups of ours? If someone is slain, is found lying in the open, the identity of the slayer is not known. We find someone who's dead lying in the open field, but we don't know who it is. The elders and the magistrates shall go out, measure the distances from the corpse to the nearby town. The elders of those towns nearest to the corpse shall take a heifer, which has never been worked, a young heifer, a female cow, or a calf, never pulled a yoke, and the elders of that town shall bring the heifer down to the ever-flowing wadi, which is not tilled or sown. There in the wadi, the valley, they shall break the heifer's neck. The priests, the sons of Levi, shall come forward, for your God has chosen them for divine service and to pronounce blessing in the name of the Lord. And every lawsuit in case of assault is subject to their ruling. Then all the elders of the town nearest to the corpse shall wash their hands over the heifer whose neck was broken in the wadi, and they shall make this declaration: Our hands did not shed this blood, nor did our eyes see it done. Absolve, Lord, your people Israel, whom you have redeemed. This animal was offered in the name of the unknown person who was killed by the unknown person who did the killing. Do not allow the guilt for the blood of the innocent remain among your people Israel. They shall be absolved of blood guilt. Thus you will remove from your midst guilt for the blood of the innocent, for you will be doing what is right in the sight of Yud-He Vav-He. So, throughout these verses, we can see that God is asking us to practice justice, righteousness, to choose leaders, a priest, a Kohen, a prophet, a king, and a judge. All these judges would need to judge the people properly. The judges are to keep us honest and straight, keep our courts honest and straight. The king would rule over the whole country, and he would judge, he would rule justly. The priest, who represents us and God, is the one who's the intermediary between us and our God, and the prophet is the one who tells us what God wants us to hear, to do what we're supposed to do. So this is the beautiful portion for this week, and we pray that God would allow just and righteous rulers in the land of Israel, in all our lands. Otherwise, we're going to keep seeing these unjust rulers. Well, that's all there is for today, and I want to wish you all a Shabbat Shalom, and I look forward to seeing you, God willing, next week. Thank you for being with us. Thank you for listening in. Please send these portions. Let the world read what it says in the Torah. Send these readings to your friends, to your relatives. Let us turn back to God. This is the only way that we're going to see a change, a turn in the tides of what's happening in this world. I wish you all a good night, and thank you for being with us. God bless you.